gentlemen of the United States, my husband. When you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for.
Vote for me and I will deliver rising wages, soaring income, and a colossal surge of jobs, wealth, and opportunity for Americans of every race, religion, color, and creed, every one of them.
Hello and welcome to our special broadcast. It is election day in the United States. The polls are now open. America will choose its next president, and the race so far, it seems, is too close to call. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris neck and neck as millions of Americans head to the polling booths to cast their votes. But here's the interesting aspect. Over 82 million people have already cast their early ballots. That's over 50% of the eligible voter base. Parikshit, it is D-Day.
Absolutely, and voting has begun in the United States. Hopefully, we will get to know the results by early morning tomorrow, but one can never say for certain. The way the race has been over the last few months, it's very close. It's been neck to neck, even in places like Pennsylvania, which are the prized battle in this election. Yes, it is the final showdown, and we are also speaking to you about the road to the White House, which will finally go through the 7 swing states that account for 93 electoral college votes. We will, of course, be keeping a close watch on Pennsylvania, as I said earlier, the one with the highest number of votes. Here's some trivia. No Democrat since 1948 has won an election without winning Pennsylvania. But not just the swing states. The so-called safe seats could also prove to be a headache for Harris and Trump, Shireen.
Absolutely. Never take anything for granted in politics, Parikshit. The opinion polls are suggesting a photo finish, but no state can be taken for granted, as we pointed out. Here's why. Consider Iowa, a traditional red state that backed Donald Trump in the last 2 elections. Kamala Harris has an edge in the state by 3 points. That is, if you go by what the poll is suggesting. In all, the candidates have done their bit. It is now over to the voters, already lining up as polling opens in America. Here's the final message to voters from Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, as well as their running mates.
Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions and the aspirations and the dreams of the American people. We are optimistic and we are excited about what we can do together. And we know it is time for a new generation of leadership in America. And I am ready to offer that leadership as the next president of the United States of America.
Those loved ones that are in your minds right now, they have fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers had. They are more at risk than they've ever been. But here's the good news. When we get that Senate, we get that House, we elect Kamala Harris, they will send over the restoration of Roe, making reproductive rights enshrined into law, and President Harris will sign it.
I will restore peace in the world, and I will rescue the American dream. Together, we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country, and we will launch the most extraordinary economic boom the world has ever seen, and we'll do it by utilizing the assets that we have. If you vote for Kamala, you will have 4 more years of misery, failure, and disaster. Our country may never recover.
While she says that she's somehow going to be different, even though she can't give you the details on how, we know that Kamala Harris is more of the same. More of the same unaffordable groceries, more of the same unaffordable health care, more of the same wide open southern border, more of the same failed leadership in Washington, D.C. And I think that Michigan, tomorrow, we're going to vote for a change. We're going to vote to take this country in a new direction. We're going to vote for prosperity. We're going to vote for Donald J. Trump.
Well, the candidates closing it out there with their final comments as America goes to the polls. We're now joined by the former Foreign Secretary Shyam. Mr. Saran, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Well, if you look at what the polls are suggesting, it could be a cliffhanger. It looks like it could go down to the wire. Mr. Saran, as you watched both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump pitch their message to the voters in America, what have been the big takeaways for you? Do you believe that this is an evenly balanced contest, or do you think that we are in for a surprise?
I'm not a political astrologer, so I don't think I can really say what the likely result is going to be. But as you yourself have pointed out, that it is very, very finely balanced. It could go either way. There are many factors which will decide ultimately who becomes the president. One of the important, I think, factors is going to be the vote from women, because one of the key issues in this election is reproductive rights. How do you treat the issue of abortion? And that seems to have galvanized a lot of the women voters to come out and vote. Will that give her that little edge, for Harris? Possibly. I mean, that's something that may happen. But let me just say what everybody else has been saying, that this is too evenly balanced an election for anybody to really hazard a guess as to what is going to happen ultimately as far as the results are concerned.
Oh, absolutely. I think the last thing that the American voter wants, and the last thing that the world wants at this point in time, is a contested election.
And uncertainty.
Further uncertainty, Parikshit. I think that would not be an outcome that anyone hopes for at this point in time. But Mr. Saran, you talked about the women's vote and how that could play a significant and a decisive role, perhaps, as far as this election is concerned. And we've just been discussing that big poll, and the pollster that's done the poll, we had her on the channel yesterday, and are talking about what Iowa is throwing up. And if that poll holds true, and it is the women's vote that goes in favor of Kamala Harris, and that's replicated in some of the other swing states, it could be a massive upset for Donald Trump.
Well, this is why I mentioned, the women's vote as being one of the crucial factors, precisely because of the experience with Iowa, where there has been a significant swing as a result of the women's vote. As you said, would this be replicated in some of the other swing states? Not very clear. We will know soon enough, I would imagine. But I don't think that even with that, there will be a massive change in terms of the vote, or in terms of the gap between the two sides. But it should be maybe just enough to be able to take Harris across the line. That possibility is perhaps somewhat more today than it was a few days back. I think that is perhaps the maximum that you can actually hazard at this point of time.
Right. We've seen this election really go down to the wire in almost all states. We were speaking about Dixie-Will also a short while back. It's a very small town with just 6 voters, and they have a tie between Trump and Harris. But if we speak about young voters, Ambassador Saran, when Democrats win, young voters turn out. Be it 2008, 2012 or 2020, Democrats won 60% more of voters 18 to 29 years old and won. In 2016, just 55% of them voted for Clinton. What do you think is happening this time around? Why is the young American voter not expressing their mind so decisively?
There is a weakness for Harris in that particular segment of the population. Why do I say that? Because, number one, I think the younger voter is not enthused enough or frightened enough of Trump to really come out in very large numbers and vote. So I think it would be interesting to see what the voter turnout in this particular category is. Second is not only the American Arab vote, which has been very much disturbed by the kind of support that the Biden administration has been giving to Israel in its kind of brutal offensive, not only in Gaza, but also now in Lebanon. This has turned off a lot of the, of course, the Arab American voters, but a lot of the liberal educated middle class voter, particularly amongst the younger people. I mean, if you look at the protests, for example, in several of the Ivy League, universities in the United States, much of this particular traditionally Democratic constituency is not very, very positive about the policies being followed by Biden and, of course, by association by Kamala Harris. So that's a weak point. And, the effort on the part of the Democratic Party to suggest that, despite their dissatisfaction on this particular score, please see what could happen, with Trump, who will, in fact, is encouraging Israel to be even more aggressive, to be even more, unrestrained in its actions in the Palestine and the Lebanon, southern Lebanon.
Since you're talking about Israel, let's talk about what potential Trump victory could mean as far as foreign policy is concerned. We heard those comments on the campaign trail talking about the allies. How do you see allies viewing the return of Donald Trump to the White House? It takes me back to a conversation that I was having with Ian Bremmer at Eurasia, and he said, everyone was anticipating an economic recession in 2023 or 2024. What we've actually seen is a political recession or a leadership recession. From a foreign policy perspective, from a geopolitics perspective, what does a potential Donald Trump victory mean, Ambassador Saran?
Well, as far as Israel is concerned, I have no doubt in my mind that Trump, as he says, will be fully behind Israel, and that means behind Netanyahu. I mean, he has said, for example, that Netanyahu should finish the job, that he is undertaking. I think what you might see is that Israel perhaps becomes even more aggressive, becomes even more unrestrained than it has been. Also, the fear that I have is that since Israel is now feeling very much empowered by the victories that it has achieved, that the next big target is really Iran. And, the targets that have been talked about are Iran's nuclear facilities, its, oil installations, that infrastructure, energy infrastructure. And, there is open talk that perhaps Israel has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to once for all really cripple Iran's nuclear industry. Will there be, for example, a wink by Trump to allow Israel to undertake such a dangerous, risky operation? And of course, that operation cannot be undertaken without very tacit support on the part of the United States. So that's one danger, point that I see could be there. The second, it's very difficult to really say what precisely will be the kind of foreign policy that Trump will pursue. He has said that, he will end the Ukraine war within days of taking over as president. If it really has to end that quickly, it can only be at the cost of the Ukraine itself.
Ambassador Saran?
Yes.
Right. Ambassador Saran, when you speak about Iran, one issue at play and a worry for the world is that if a war breaks out, there will be an energy crisis, especially related to volatility in crude prices. Now, Trump, throughout this campaign, has been very encouraging of oil companies, saying that drill, baby, drill. We want companies to drill more oil. It'll be a setback for the peace accord as well. How do you think the U.S. energy companies, especially those in oil production, are going to see a Trump victory?
Well, as far as Iran is concerned, even if the Iranian oil industry was knocked out in some sense, that may not make such a big difference as far as global, oil market is concerned. There could be second-order effects. If there is, for example, a spreading of the war from just being limited to Iran to the rest of the West Asia and Gulf region, then of course there will be a major impact on oil supplies, on energy supply, and oil prices will go up. As far as the US itself is concerned, don't forget that US is today perhaps the largest oil exporter and oil producer in the world. It's exporting both oil as well as gas. It has become a major, for example, supplier to Europe itself. So as far as the US itself is concerned, it is somewhat, relatively speaking, somewhat insulated from what may happen in the Middle East. That is a very big change from before. So we have to keep that in mind. Of course, in the longer term, allowing the oil companies, American oil companies, to go ahead and drill even in some very, very, sensitive areas, that may have an impact, but it will have an impact not immediately. It will have an impact over a period of time.
Ambassador Saran, let's talk about India. I was having a conversation with John Chambers, and he said perhaps one of the few things that both the Republicans and the Democrats agree on is India and America's relationship with India. If it is a continuation and Kamala Harris comes to office or Donald Trump returns, what could it potentially mean for Indo-US ties?
So I think the density of relationship that has been now established between the two countries. If you look at, for example, the defense relationship, if you look at the technology relationship, there is every expectation that whether it is Harris or whether it is Trump, that particular relationship is going to continue to advance. So that's the good news, that this will not have such a major impact on some of the ongoing kind of, very close relations that we have with Trump. The expectation, I think, in the current political dispensation in Delhi is that under Trump, perhaps there will be less pressure on India on things like, human rights or, the communal issue, perhaps. They will not face the same kind of heat that they perhaps to some extent may face with a Democratic administration. But I think that it should be appreciated that even though the direct impact may seem to be somewhat limited, there can be a number of very serious second-order effects on India. Because if there is a major disruption, for example, in the global economy as a result of the, putting in place of the 60% tariffs on China, the 10% across-the-board tariffs on the rest of, global trade, naturally this will have an impact on India. And if there is a general kind of an uncertainty and disruption across the globe, because the US is such a major player, I think there will be negative impacts on India.
Yes, you talked about China as well as the possibility of higher tariffs. So let me get in a word on China as well. A Trump win and what that potentially means as far as China is concerned, Ambassador Saran.
Well, one view is that, of course, there is every reason to expect that relations between the US and China will get much worse before they get better. That is one reading, especially if the tariff increase comes in the manner that people expect. But there is also evidence from the previous Trump administration that he sees himself as a kind of a deal maker. And it is possible that he may also end up by doing certain kind of, transactional deals with China. If China is ready to, for example, buy more, soya beans from the US or more wheat from the US, there could be a somewhat of a balance there. So we have to watch out whether that transactional aspect, in fact, comes to the fore, or whether the sense of rivalry with China becomes sharper. Trump himself tries to project that he's good for the US because he's ready to make bargains, and that he's able to use, for example, the threat of tariffs to get a better deal for the United States. So how, on balance, will US-China relations be affected? That remains a question mark. Also will depend upon, for example, what kind of a policy Trump follows with respect to Russia. That if there is a major shift in that respect, that may in fact reduce the pressure on China, which is facing some difficulty because of the fact that it is seen as being very close to Russia.
And Ambassador Saran, let's just speak finally about the Indian American voter. Shireen, we had seen in the Indian American Attitude Survey by the Carnegie Endowment Center. And Ambassador Saran, we saw that while, as per that survey, the Indian American electorate in the US, which is about 1% or little more than 1%, has largely been in favor of Democrats. The percentage has declined, and probably there has been a shift towards the Republican by 7 to 8%, largely driven by the young male Indian American voter. What do you think could be possibly driving that change? Because largely the Indian American voter is not enthused by Republicans because they feel that they are not pro-minority, they are very aggressive as far as illegal immigration goes.
Well, from what I have seen, is that if there has been a shift towards the Republican Party amongst the Indian diaspora, it is apparently amongst the upper percentile. I mean, those who are much richer and perhaps who see a Trump administration as creating a more congenial kind of economic environment for the rich class in the United States of America. That particular segment has obviously moved towards the Republican Party. As far as the younger Indian diaspora is concerned, I'm not very sure about what you said, that there has been a shift there also. Although I do hear that that part of the diaspora may have been also influenced by what is happening in India. And, there has been a strong kind of in some quarters at least, a strong ideological affinity being seen with Trump. So maybe that segment is leaning a little more towards the Republican Party. But my sense is that a large proportion of the Indian diaspora is still very much in the Democratic camp.
Ambassador Saran, before we let you go, I'm going to push you into a corner, sir. With all the caveats on the table, and I know that you're not a pollster, you're not a psephologist, but what does your gut tell you, sir, after decades of being in the Foreign Service and observing elections around the world? What does your gut tell you?
I think even if you are putting me on the spot, I doubt whether I can offer anything which is of any value in terms of prediction. As I pointed out, that if I see the latest trends in the voting in the United States, and the point I mentioned about the women's vote, that might just provide the little edge she needs to get across the finishing line. I mean, that is as much as I can hazard from my side.
Well, that is an important factor that we are going to be watching very, very closely. Ambassador Saran, it's always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us today on the big day. But of course, we'll have you back with us when we do know the outcome of this historic election, whether it will be Donald Trump back in the White House as the oldest president of the United States, or Kamala Harris creating history, becoming the first woman to enter the White House. We will, of course, have you back with the implications of the victory of the U.S. elections. But for this evening, many, many thanks for joining us. That is the former Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Shyam Saran. Before we wrap, we leave you with the live pictures coming in from, of course, the U.S. elections as polling is on, and images from the ancestral village of Kamala Harris in Tamil Nadu. A special prayer being held at the temple in the village, which is 300 kilometers from the state capital, Chennai. Kamala Harris's maternal grandfather, R.P.V. Gopalan, was born in this village more than a century ago. Harris's mother, Shyamala Gopalan, was born in Chennai before she moved to the U.S. at the age of 19. At the temple, Harris's name is engraved on a stone that lists public donations along with that of her grandfather. Outside, a banner was erected that wished the daughter of the land success in the election. There were a couple of American tourists who supported Harris present in the village for the prayers.
Not news, happy news. Everybody, enthusiastic. And you can find every houses. They feel their one of our family member going to become U.S. president.
It's been so far away from home, and it's been a crazy election year. And I'm very pro-Kamala, so we wanted to come here and experience her village, her native village.
And we wanted to support her while we're here in India, so we came here today to this temple for a puja that we heard is happening. Every little bit helps. We want her to be president so badly, and it's been a beautiful ceremony, and we're very happy to be a part of it.